organised AD or global kidney health to try and tackle these issues, to try and think about ways that you could prevent the development of stage kidney disease, one, and for those who do develop it, how we could deliver this where it's, and talk about transplantation to see how this could be integrated. Then really it's part of, or at least delaying the onset. If you're, and there are many places in the globe where that's not happening, that you need to develop, you need a national wait list of patients for dialysis, you need to develop and just allocation systems, and then basically transplantation to any country, there needs to be some process so the treatment's based on need and you don't have cost and financial crisis when you're trying to fund something to stay alive that you can't afford. So, and then when you get transplantation, you need to think about how we're funding maintenance, immunosuppression, how do we develop standards and bring things up, and then cost economic sense still holds true. Others for transplantation is dialysis, because patients know that transplantation is better and it's going to give them a better quality of life. So how can we look at the global distribution of transplantation? So there are various maps, and I know Jose showed one looking at it regionally. So this is looking at activity based on gross national income per patient. So in other words, that if your gross average national income is $10,000, which seems a bit of a serious cut-off, you can see, and not unexpectedly, that developing something like a transplant service is going to be less effective than if your gross national income, your median income is around $70,000. But there are some standouts. So the big bubbles are India and China. I've got to admit, Sarah White provided the data for this. I don't quite know how she got the Indian data, but they seem to be travelling where you'd expect for what, in terms of transplant activity, as is China. Countries that really stand out are Iran and Turkey. That these are places that, based on their national income, are doing better than you would expect. And if you heard Malik Hosseini's talk, in some places they're doing outstandingly well. And then there are some countries that are, where things are a bit disappointing. For instance, in Japan, despite having a very high standard of living, for various social and structural reasons that have been hard to shift, their level of transplant activity isn't what you would hope or expect. So all these things, if you think about that, there is a lot of things that people then can drive to improve organ donation. And the reason I didn't sort of carry on that talk, if you look through the program, there's quite a lot of talks about initiatives in developing countries, how to overcome these. The other reason is that the talk I was going to give was given by Jeremy Chapman, because we hadn't talked to each other before we left Sydney to work out what we're going to talk about here in Istanbul. But one of the things that actually helps develop, there's a lot of things you need to develop deceased donation, including starting with legislation, regulations, oversight by health departments, but one of the big ones is a just and transparent system, so that people, the whole community, feels that allocation's based on need and community priorities, not based on who can afford to pay or the fact that you're, related to the health minister. And when you do that, you need a policy that everyone understands, and that does require some patient. That does require some community education. So basically, these are some of the things that I think are general principles when you're looking at organ allocation. There needs to be a balance between equity and utility, and those need to be underpinned by ethical principles. yet both could be justified on ethical principles. The next thing is that you need to maximise the number of organs available for transplantation. So that means that on average you need about three and a half different organs from each donor. So you need to make sure that if you do have utilised and used, and that sounds obvious, but it does require a lot of organisation. And then you also need to maximise patient and organ survival, so you're maximising the number of life years gained. Minimise deaths on the waiting list and minimise disparities in opportunity amongst patients. So they're sort of general principles you say you need to do. So this is looking at the Australian situation, and what I've shown here on the left is the allocation algorithm for kidney transplantation in Australia. So it's not, I'm not going to talk about how we do that specifically. I'm happy to answer any questions. I guess to say that if you want to go read it, then you can go to the Transplant Society of Australia and New Zealand website and just look that up. So it's publicly available. Everyone, you can look it up, and it's got the allocation algorithms for hearts, kidneys, lungs, livers, the lot. So it's available to the public. And basically what it looks at, it considers four things. So it considers sensitisation. So again, highly sensitised patients get a national override and preference. And there's paediatric weighting. So it seems reasonable that patients under the age of 18 get preference. There's HLA matching, and then there's wait time. There's a combination of points you get for each of these, and then the person with the largest number of points gets the transplant. So at the moment, at least until next week, we haven't really considered the recipient age, and donor factors, and the age of the donor hasn't been considered. But I guess things are changing slightly, because for those of you who were at Jeremy's talk, realise that we've essentially doubled the number of organ donors we've had, and we've doubled transplant activity, which has had an impact on that. And that's been a positive one. So if you look here at the median wait time, this is from Anstarter, the median wait time from 2011 to 2016, which is the last data we have available publicly, there's been a modest reduction, which is encouraging, from 2.8 to 2.4 years. And then, and the mortality rate, though, has been fairly consistent at about 2.1 deaths per 100 patient years. So the other aspect I just want to point out, this is looking at transplants per 100 dialysis years in each age cohort. And if you look here from those from 0 to 4 to age 24, you can see that basically every year that round about well over, say, around about 70 or 60 or 70% of those patients get transplanted, which means that the policy is working, that we're giving a weighting to paediatric patients being transplanted. And as you get older, the proportion, the transplant wait gets longer. And that's the current situation. Now, the other thing that we're doing, and I pointed out, we're not looking at donor factors really when we're allocating these, is that we have increased our donor rate, that's true, and we've increased all types, including brain dead, standard criteria donors in the blue bar, but we've also had a very big increase in extended criteria donors and brain dead donors, and the combination of brain dead and extended criteria donors. And their organs, they don't do as well as others. So this is, look at the Anstarter registry, and looking here at quality of the donors, and you can see here, as you'd expect, and has been shown a lot of other places, that low quality donors have the worst 5-year outcomes. So quality does matter, and age does matter in these. So this is a slide from UNOS, and we're bringing in a modification, or hoping to bring in a modification of this, where they're trying to match two things. So they're trying to match the kidney donor profile index, which takes a lot of donor factors, a big one being donor age, and then they give that a score. So the higher the score, you might say, if you're from the recipient perspective, the worse the donor. And then they look at the recipient factors in a different box where they look at the estimated post-transplant survival. And they try and match the better kidneys, or those with the lowest KD-PI score, with the patients with the expected best survival, as that's going to improve utility, but you then have to do that in an equitable way. So next week we're bringing in a modification of that in Australia. No, sorry, it might be next year. And then we have a risk-matched algorithm, and it's been based where we then went back with our registry data, and so this is also a good way of how you can use your registry to help you make rational decisions, where we modelled everything on our registry patients to see what happens if we brought a modification of that UNOS system in Australia. So in other words, if you've got, we call it KDRI, that if you've got a kidney that's in the lowest KDRI, and then you give that to those with the lowest centile estimated patient transplant survival, so these are the patients who have the best survival, then if you match those kidneys, yeah, and then if you, we're almost done here, then if you match also, then if you say that if you're not in that group, that you then have the older kidneys with the, and worse kidneys with those with less optimal survival outcomes, and then you try and age match that or limit the age differential in those and allocate those, that you then have two groups to which you're allocating. So basically the national allocation algorithm, which we've devised and everyone agreed, that still works, but it works in two separate groups to allocate the kidney within those two cohorts. And if you do that and put that in the model, that what they showed, if you match the best 30% of kidneys and recipients, defined by KDPI and EPTS, then you do get what we hope we would, which we should get better health outcomes for younger recipients. And it was estimated that they would get basically a 2-year survival gain than on our current allocation system. The downside of that is if you're older, there's a slight increase in wait times, but no deterioration in your survival. And if you're in middle age, then there's no change in wait time or survival if you're between 45 and 60. So that's what the system went, and based on that data, we're bringing in that twist to what we currently do. So we think we can do that. So then the other thing is, well, what did the community say about that? Because it is a system for them, and we need to think about that. So this is a publication where they had groups, and they looked at community preference for allocation. So they gave them scenarios and asked them what did they think was appropriate allocation of those organs. And what they said was that they felt that they gave highest priority that recipients who were younger, who had been registered as donors, and those who'd been longer on dialysis deserved preference. And those whose life expectancy was considered without transplantation with risk, in other words, based on need, and had minimal comorbidity. So in essence, that they had a combination of utility and equity, and if you took these community considerations, we could justify what we're doing in modifying our system going into the future. So if I could just summarise now in the remaining time I have, that I think that end-stage kidney disease, we should be talking about this in public health terms. We should be pointing out to our political masters that this is a major public health issue and it needs to be managed accordingly, and we should put the whole model of care forward, which includes transplantation. And that should be integrated into a national strategy for end-stage kidney disease management. Now, I think things we can do in-house is I think there needs to be better talking between dialysis centres and transplant centres, so the appropriate patients are being referred and are available for transplantation, that we're not here to build empires, we're here for the public good. We need to optimise transplant outcome, and that means looking seriously at our allocation policies. And we need to develop programs where prevention, diagnosis and treatment, which includes both dialysis and transplantation, are integrated. And this integrated program needs to be offered to the whole community, not those who can afford it, and that's really consistent with the current UN WHO initiative for sustainable health development and universal health care coverage, which is a strong initiative of the WHO. And naturally, all these programs must be compatible with the WHO guiding principles and the Declaration of Istanbul. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I will allow one question, please. Anyone?
No.
Thank you, Phil.
No worries.
And I will hand on to my co-chair, Dr. Nasser Safarouch, to introduce the second speaker.
Thank you. The next speaker in the session, Anwar Naqvi from Pakistan. Professor Anwar Naqvi is known to everybody, an ethical man from an ethical department. He's going to discuss about the curbing illegal organ trade to promote disease donation.
Thank you very much. We've been dealing with the problem of organ sales and commercial transplantation, which brought Pakistan a very bad name a few years ago. And any attempts at trying to approach people and talk about deceased organ donation, this commercialism was coming in the way all the time. So let me share our experience. So as you see, that we belong to the WHO region of Southeast Asia. And as you can see, the blue bars are for the living donors, and the very small strip that you see is of the deceased donation in our region, and that's primarily India, which contributes to this. The emerald region is little better. What we want to achieve, in fact, is what are these countries, where they do roughly 50,000 transplants, and almost 80% of them come from deceased organ source. So we have to cover a long distance in trying to bring ourselves to provide a robust means of offering transplantation to those who need it. And as you can see with this data as well, that our part of, sorry, so we all are in this region, which we have to move with a lot of hard work and motivating the society to reach what we can. There are 4 countries, 3 from Europe, UK, Belgium, and Netherlands, who have done some increase in their DCD programs. And you can also see China here, which is now bringing about that change. But we are far from it. And as I said, the biggest challenge that we faced was of the sale and of kidneys in the centers started mushrooming up. The Indians got their act together and had the legislation, and the thing shifted to Pakistan. And we are still grappling with that, although it is much less, but it is still impacting on our deceased organ donor program. As you remember, with this study which we had, the Indian and our studies more or less said the same thing, that the vendors were the poorest of the community. In our case, it was still worse because they were actually bonded labor. That means they were paying the debts of their parents. So it was modern day slavery. And the reason for going for vending was to pay the debts. This is both in Indian and the Pakistani studies. When he did the second study, second part of it, we found that because they were not advised on any lifestyle changes and they were not seen at all after kidney donation, kidney vending, the GFR compared to our donors at SIUT was poorer. They had proteinuria, they had more hypertension, but the worst was that these vended kidneys were harboring hepatitis C antibodies, which was being passed on to the people who were obtaining this kidneys. And obviously then they were faring, nobody knows what the results were, because most of them came from outside Pakistan and they used to go back and face the consequences. So this destroyed the trust in the transplantation teams altogether. And this is a cartoon appearing in one of the largest selling English newspaper. And that is how a doctor was perceived as being involved into the trade itself. And when you see the impact, it took us a long time to get our legislation because of this, because of the influence that they were peddling in the parliament and every places that delayed the bringing about of the legislation. But the doctors themselves were making a lot of money. And that also came into the public. And of course, this killed the deceased organ donation program. The worst thing was that when you approach and you thought that the family is agreeing on a donation, a deceased organ donation, several times it comes out that they say that if we do that, our relations in the village will say that you have sold the kidney. Because all what they have heard in the living donor situation is what panned out even in this process. So we all remember, a lot of our colleagues are sitting here who were part of this. I think this was a game changer, because the impact of the Istanbul conference was, and endorsed by another 100 organizations, was that it did stem the tide for quite a few places. Philippines, for example, made a difference only because of the influence of what was agreed upon by this. And then there was a declaration of Istanbul custodial group, and we were getting emails one after the other from Australia, Kuwait, UAE, you name the place, that where these people were going. The patients came from far off countries, mainly Middle East, but far beyond. And when they were not doing well, then the physicians used to report it to the custodial group. And they used to write to us to try and trace. But there were so little details about them that for them to be prosecuted was next to an impossible task. But we took a cue from that. We had a Chief Justice who was very fond of suo motu cases of public interest. So we pursued this as a human rights issue. And he was convinced, and he said, if you want to make any changes, why don't you call all the stakeholders That means doctors, prosecutors, police, federal investigation agencies, all, and have a good 2-day or 3-day meeting and give me the recommendations. Then I'll examine it and then see what can be done. So this took place in SIUT. So it was a national conference and workshop, and although it was only on the illegal transplants of organs, we made it into the other part of promoting deceased organ donation, and that's the title of the talk as well. And this was under the aegis of the Supreme Court body which helps public issues. So we had a 2-day conference. These are the plenary sessions. Then we had small sessions on the legal and the government side of things, so that how to prosecute, where the loopholes were and how to plug them. We had another which is how the media can mold public opinion and educate the masses in trying to bring about the changes in their attitudes about deceased organ donation. Then reaching out to the people by donor cards, driving licenses and so on, and the role of the professionals. So what about the ICU people? What is their duties? How to take care of the donors, potentially to see that there are, till the decision by the family takes place, that they are medically treated appropriately. Then we took it to the Supreme Court and they examined it, and these are some of the points which I wish to make about that. That public education should be made mandatory, and they brought in a rule which was always there but never practiced, and so each channel, for example, and all the television companies have a corporate social responsibility, and under that they can provide advertisements for public issues, and we managed to take that up and get a sanction on that, and therefore I think we can make progress on this event. The organ donation process should be facilitated by a pledge of a donor card. They just encourage that. Educational authorities have been instructed by the Ministry of Education to bring about changes in the, not the changes, but introduction of new topics of organ donation at school and college level. So about the living donors, they have set up very solid methods of effective instructions to the law enforcing agencies to initiate prosecution. The medical superintendent and chief operating officers of public and private hospitals should be involved through notification and instructions by the government to that effect. And the government should also see that there is a transplant fund for those who are indigent and would require help. And the most important of all was that it should be mandatory for all public and private hospitals to report all brain death cases to the Human Organ Transplant Authority. And this we thought was important. Furthermore, the Human Organ Transplant Authority all have coordinators of themselves, but the hospital coordinators should be a reality, and instructions have been issued already. Where there is medical legal cases, because in our part of the world, most of the brain death comes from trauma. And then there is the police surgeon which is involved. So some legal formalities occur because of that. The hospital ICU intensivists to ensure that donor is taken care of till the family decides. So this is how the Human Organ Transplant Authority has been into all 4 provinces to function with the evaluation, awareness, recommending, and the post-audit follow-up. As a result, we found that the police came into action, and the largest center of illegal transplant was raided, and it was sealed. And 3 surgeons were put behind bars. One of them is still in jail. That was the reason of how sometimes judicial activism can be of use when you're in desperate situations. The religious scholars also took a cue from that and have helped us with having more of information amongst themselves in different religious organizations and madrasas to propagate the case. The brain death notification, as I said, has been passed on to all hospitals. The electronic media, a regulatory authority, has been instructed to use the corporate social responsibility to help advertise. One thing I wish to just make is that the patients who have come from Pakistan to Pakistan, they are part of a clandestine mafia which arranges all this. And so they have no information about the centers, their expertise, the infrastructure. And these people bring them to such places that they are not hospitals to be called as a hospital. They are makeshift houses where transplantation are done. And there is no standards of any sort. Recently, we heard that they were being moved from one place to the other in the containers which carries cargo. So, and the patients are sent back to the countries where they came from in the shortest possible time, sometimes within a week. So the stitches are not out and they are sent back. So what we want to make a plea is that if the DICG wishes us to conduct all the inquiries, we should have more information, and unless we have that information, we will not be able to make any headway on all what we have gained with the Supreme Court as well. So thank you very much for your attention.
So we have a little bit time for a question from the floor. Is there any question?
Yeah, Anwar, the HOTA. I have problems with the HOTA.
Okay.
Because the HOTA does not report everything. And unfortunately, many of the centers, as you know, not in Karachi, but outside Karachi, they only report a fraction of what they do to the HOTA, but not everything. And till now, this has not taken place.
See, one of the things is that we wanted the HOTA to be a central body for the whole country and having branches into the 4 provinces. But that has not happened. They've got this devolution, and that is not working because it can be okay because we are there in the province of Sindh. But what happens in Punjab if people are not cooperative and not active about it? So that is a problem, and I think we'll attend to that as well, yes. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Any question over there?
Thank you for that presentation. You talked about a lot of things, but maybe I missed this, but you did refer to the deceased organ donations being more prevalent in India than Pakistan. But what are the figures for Pakistan? How many have happened, and are the rates increasing? Can you comment on that?
I had a presentation of Dr. Radeep Rizvi in the morning, so I covered that area into that. We hardly have had any, but only 5 deceased organ donations which have occurred.
But the legislation supports this, right? There is no problem with the laws?
No, the legislation is supportive, yes.
Okay. One more question. Yes.
What kind of living donations is allowed in your country right now?
Living donation?
Living donation, is like family or what kind of?
They are all intrafamilial. It is illegal to have anybody outside the family.
Yes, it has been shown in the last TTS. Before also it was told, as we discussed before, when they reviewed donors in long term in big data from Johns Hopkins, the more renal failure in donors significantly was more in family donors comparing non-families, because there's some family background, genetic background in the family. So I think we have to stop pushing families to donate kidneys and to make two people crippled from one family. So we have to work more in disease and other kind of donations rather than families. This should come up in different scientific medias more seriously.
I don't think this is borne out by data from anywhere. I can say about FSGS that you don't take a donor, which is likely to be, but I don't think that there are any studies to prove.
Abraham also published his data some years before, but this came last TTS, big data from Johns Hopkins.
Magdi, you had a point, I think, on this.
It's very, very interesting what you said. Everything what you said makes sense. You have a mic? I think I'm loud enough to speak. Yeah, okay. Then I don't know anybody, talks. So, Anwar, one thing which came to me, I was recently looking that the whole Indian subcontinent, there is one thing which very, very common, but though it's very bad, but for organ donation, is the traumatic deaths which happen in Pakistan as well as India. For example, reported cases of over 3,000 deaths, road traffic accidents. That doesn't include the other cases. So in order for capturing that young accidental death, won't it be nice to have built-in trauma centers close to center like yourself, where these cases are brought in and given free care in that trauma center, and then link that to organ donation, because those will be the most easy, hopefully, people to, and I think I noted that next to SIUT there was, I think, government-sponsored trauma center.
Yes.
Did anything happen there?
Well, it is started to function in its full steam, and I think we are going to be seeing more changes for the positive. Yes.
So that you're already thinking along those lines?
Yes, yes. A good point that you make.
Okay, I think we end this discussion here. Thank you very much. And I want to present the next speaker, Professor Hirota Egawa. And this talk is named Challenges to Increase Organ Donation in Japan.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present the challenges of organ donation in Japan. As the Professor O'Connell showed that in his talk, Japan has a special situation, and the medicine is so developed, but the number of transplantation is very small, and almost all organ donors are living. And the first heart transplantation in Japan was done in the next year of the first heart transplantation in the world. But unfortunately, the diagnosis of brain death and the indication for the transplantation was unclear. So newspaper accused the surgeons, and impression of transplantation is murder was fixed in the Japanese citizens for 30 years. It was a dark 30 years. But recently, finally, the dark cloud is vanishing. And this is the current situation in Japan. The first one is the number of institutions, the heart, liver, lung, pancreas, kidney, bowel. And the second line is the, about the estimated number of the patients who require transplantation per year. And only the kidney, we have 330,000 patients on dialysis. And many people were listed, but 1/3 of the patients die before the transplantation. The organs who are saved by a living donor are saved, but otherwise almost patients die. Especially the heart transplantation, the artificial heart is covered by insurance, so many patients are waiting for the heart with the artificial heart in Japan. But once the patient undergo the transplantation, the result is supremely good. This is the red one is the DBD, and the blue one is DCD. DCD is only for the kidney transplantation in Japan. And the total number did not change, even after we changed the brain death law in which the brain death patient can donate his or her organs with family's consent. Otherwise, before the changing, we need the written informed consent. I was invited to the Vatican, and the email from Delmonico said, Japan still send the patient to the United States. So I just imagined a Pope scolded me in front of them. But and this is the slides which I showed, and as you see, then almost all the donors are living, and in kidney and the liver. And this is another slide which I used there, and the number of foreign patients travel to your country for kidney and liver transplantation. And also it is very difficult to find the number, but only the 31 patients who underwent successful transplantation in other countries until 2013 were registered. And 2015, 2 patients went to the Republic of Belarus. And regarding the kidney, it is impossible to follow. So it's an underground transplantation. But last year, I found 2 patients went to China, and I was asked to take care of these patients. And they just said they went to China in 2017. But we have specific regulatory actions. That anyone is punished with a fine of 50,000 or 5-year imprisonment. A person who committed organ trafficking abroad, for example, the doctor, should be punished as well. And some hospitals reported a suspicious case to the police, but police never moved. This is the PMP of deceased donor in Asia. The Japan, the PMP is very small. But this is the national survey in 2017. Do you want to donate your organ when you become brain dead? This is the total age. It's 42% of patients will donate. But strikingly, from 18 to 29% year, 70% of the patients will donate. And until the 50% of the patients will donate. This is a very high incidence, maybe the highest in the world. So why? And this is just intentionally Japanese. This is a brain death law. And the fundamental concept, the line 2, the will for donate his or her organ of the person who has before his death should be respected. So we, means medical professionals, cannot deny the hope or will of the patients for donation. If we should keep this law, a donor hospital, transplant institution, and Japan Organ Sharing Network, it is a Japanese special organization. It's a combined OPO and UNOS, and administration, government. Why so small number? This is the figure of the hospital ready for organ donation. And 896 hospitals are certified for organ donation. But more than half of the hospitals are not ready. And until 2015, the transplant surgeons just say more organ to save patient, otherwise patient die. But the neurosurgeons know we are very busy. The organ procurement is not our business. This is the, the lateral lines, so never closed. So, and I was invited to the Barcelona for the celebration on 25th, and I participated in the international course. I was so surprised. ICU doctor, and so everybody is very happy, and I felt some enthusiasm for the organ donation. So I learned several things. ICU doctors should be main players. Government, not the transplant surgeon. The government sent a set member consisting of medical professional, ICU doctor, coordinator, administration. Already 50 Japanese participate in the international course, but almost all the participant is coordinator or ICU, even the ICU doctor, but alone. And we should make our own system suitable to own resident. So instead of enthusiasm, we should have something, basic fundamental concept for donation share, which should be able to be shared with transplant surgeons and ICU doctors and the neurosurgeons. Now we need a good company to go through a whole process. A communication skill is the most important. And all countries except Japan succeeded. So I have some homeworks. First one is say hello to the societies, to the acute medicine field, especially neurosurgery. So I began to stay and, during the meeting period in the exhibition hall. And the first symposium by all for acute medicine relating to society during the annual meeting. So we invited a representative of the 4 acute medicine societies to our annual meeting and investigate all Japanese DTI participants. And I chose the 4 good persons and sent them to the DTI again the last spring. And negotiated the Ministry of Health and Welfare about construction of driving force, enhanced organ donation inside the acute medicine field, not transplant site. And we have a special research project chosen by President of Acute Medicine. He is a professor of acute medicine of Nippon Medical University. This is the photo of the sitting on the desk and say hello to the neurosurgeon. And this is the picture of the 4 excellent doctors studying in Barcelona. And this is the very important picture. The introduce them to the new hospital in Girona and Catalonia. They are just constructing the system at the hospital, began to the construct. So it is very important and useful and fruitful visit for them. And they learn this figure and sharing office and the OPO, mother hospital, the donor hospital, and also the payment of procurement. And we imported this system, and we chose already one hospital and made a $500,000 budget for 2 years and make a new model. So that if we succeed, so we spread this model. And also, this is the homepage and the recruit for the simulation for hands-on seminar. This is another neurosurgical emergency society hands-on seminar like that. And this is the figure of the Yokota project, which I told, and the improvement of certification, donor family, and construction efficient system of organ donation. So when we say the first line and organ donation, they do not come. Just the most important thing is the improvement of certification of donor family and construction. But this concept was learned or obtained from the Girona. So when they visited, and the ICU doctor told us, and after the DTI came and settled the new system, the patient died happy. So this is a very important concept. And the Yokota project has two big flows. One is the procurement side. Another one is organ recovery side. And for the procurement, they make a handbook for the beginner hospital. And the second one is that to reduce the stress of the neurosurgeons. We are going to make a new medical professional, like a social worker, to take a family and from admission to the discharge, even though they recover or not. And also in Japan, the procurement hospital have a task for the report to the government, very thick papers, so we reduced the half. Anyway, this is the handbook like that, so just one book. And this is a cartoon. And in Japan, the neurosurgeon or attendee take care of everything until the death. But we changed this system, so we put make a new professionals to help him. So let the neurosurgeon concentrate his own work. Own means professional work. And the next step, the next 3 years, I and Ministry of Health are planning and for the next project to improve manage organ and donor management and improvement of the marginal donor. And also we are going to make the local OPO. Now, so JOT has the role of procurement, allocation, education, only one organization. And now, 1, 2, 3, 4, we are making the 4 OPO, but to run the OPO, we need money. And in Japan, in the reimbursement system, items covered by insurance are registered by government, of course, and it is added or deleted every 2 years. And transplant surgical cost is, of course, registered, but it includes only personal expense of surgeons, nurse, and consumer goods such as needles. And the organ recovery cost also just a personal expense and preservation solution and consumable goods. But cost of organ procurement and allocation is not registered, just a mistake of the government 30 years ago. And this is the cash flow in Japan, and the patient paid 30% of the cost, but we have a maximum. Usually the patient who received liver transplantation just pay $1,000 when he or she discharged. The residual money of 30% covered by government. And after transplantation, immunosuppression also covered by government. But procurement cost is not covered. And so the transplant hospital and the donor hospital donate 20% of the surgical income to the Japan organ transplantation network, almost $30,000. So I'm going to make a new item on the list, so 30,000 list for procurement. So this is not the goal. If it is settled and the procurement is paid enough, so local OPO can be run. So more careful and friendly procurement can be done in the setting, I guess. This is a grand design. Just now, small number, but in 2034, I want $500. If we have $500, all heart transplants patient can be saved. They are not to be able to buy living donor. So this is the concept to penetrate from the neurosurgeon to the transplant surgeon. Why do we do the organ transplantation? To fulfill hope of a donor who wants to help somebody. Accomplish organ donor, make the donor and donated organ to survive as long as possible. As a result, our patient can survive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there any comment, questions from the floor?
Thank you. I want to ask one question. Why did you choose neurosurgeon instead of neurologist?
Oh,
was it
I
possible
skipped that. 60% the cause of death of the deceased donor is intracranial bleeding.
But most of them are cared in the neurology department instead of neurosurgery department.
In Japan, a cranial emergency is the patient of cranial emergency will be treated by neurosurgeon first. And the intensivers sometimes, but intensivers can understand both. They intubate, and the patient have a chance to become brain dead. But experienced neurosurgeon can expect this patient will be the brain death due to the severe injury. They do not intubate, let them die.
In many countries, the neurologists do the same thing too. But
maybe a neurologist is the same. So in your country, you can switch to the neurologist.
yeah. But so my question was, why didn't you use neurologist? But there is a valuable resource that it can be used instead of neurosurgeon. In Japan, like there is a neurologist too, so that can be used as well as a resource.
No.
Sorry. I think this is a regulatory regarding to the country, not to the process itself. And if the Japanese wants a neurosurgeon, this is a government decision, and I don't think this is for us to discuss now. Any other question? Yes, two. One, Tony, and then.
You said something about the donor happy, what is the way to make the donor happy or the family of the donor happy? I mean, you're saying in Japan, if they believe that the donor is happy, this might be an incentive for donation. Is that correct? That's what
Yes.
How can you, is it through talking to the family, or there is another way to?
This is a very good question, but just statistically, the 60% of the patient, the Japanese people want to donate.
60%?
60%. And after younger than 50 years old. So just imagine 6% of the people means almost all in a practical.
But there are data, what I will be showing tomorrow, data from Japan where there is a resistance for donation, and even those who consent to donate, half of them, 12 or 15%, would accept to sign a card. So there is a big,
of course.
And this is reflected, in fact, in the statistics we've seen today at several occasions, where there's a very low rate of donation in Japan, 15 per million. I guess, Philip, you have shown this. In Japan, there is a low rate of
donation, this is a result.
Sorry.
So the reason why the low rate donation is the system error of the acute medicine field. The Japanese who want to donate cannot donate in Japan now. Cannot donate. Although the law seek to respect the will.
So it's a cultural problem, what you're saying? Is it
not the culture.
No.
Emergency fields, they are too busy. You are too busy to take care of the brilliant patients.
We have one short question.
Thank you so much for your very informative presentation. It seems these are great steps forward towards increasing the number of deceased organ donation in Japan. But still, I think the cultural hesitancy and reluctancy to donate their organ when they are a dead person or a brain dead person, I think that would be a huge challenge in Japan. And I was wondering if, alongside of all these activities, are you thinking about how to bring the, let's say, the religious authorities on board and also public awareness about organ donation? So,
discussion about the religion is not the task of here, but basically the religion, the Buddhism is the life for the other. So the real Buddhists should donate. And the program for the taking the agreement of the family, the situation, in that situation, when the people say, the family, her or his will for donation before the catastrophe, the family can decide collectively. So we now have a campaign to talk at a family, with the family about her or his will for donation in the ordinary life. So it is a next challenge for the citizens.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is a great friend of mine, Abdelhadi Brizat, who is from Jordan, and will be talk to us about the organization of organ donation and allocation agencies, a country experience for Jordan. Abdelhadi.
Hello. Good evening, everybody, Mr. Chairman, audience. I will try to be quick, not to make you boring. So can you show, please, the slide? Please, can you change this? So Jordan, I know, is a Middle East country, a small one country, the population about 9.5 million. 2 of them are guests, not refugees, as you like to say. And the countries are small, so we didn't need any aviation to bring organs or something like this. As you know, donation is life. God's gift for humanity, the secret of existence. So this is a hope, and the hope is coming every time we are gathering together. And you know, there may be more than 20 or 25 meetings, workshops, conferences, always doing with how to improve the donation services. And all the countries, developing countries, formulated many legislations issue to improve the quality and the safety of organ transplantation. What about Jordan? In 1956, Jordan issued a law of using eyes of dead human bodies. However, the first cornea had been implanted in 1979, and it was even imported one. In 1997, Jordan established a Jordan Eye Bank. So, after that, the first is in 1997, and the first donated cornea local in 1991. It means after 32 years. So even there is legislation, even there is a law, but there is not so good progress. But if we look now, after creation a Jordanian bank authorities, so the local donation between 1992 and 2006 was 100 cornea per year local donation, but after that, from 2007 to 2015, it increased up to 232. It means we have an increase of cornea donation 100%. So definitely there's a decrease in imported cornea, where we are importing from the United States mainly by 40%. Sorry. In 1997, law of the usage of organs and tissue of a human body, living and deceased. Again, paradoxically, the first kidney was transplanted in 1972 before the law, and it was a deceased one. This is very important to be announced by the Prince criteria to set up the criteria for organ transplantation centers and publication of scientific work and research. So we start to train people. Before that, we start to encourage people awareness about organ donation. So we participate in two campaigns to enter the Guinness record and filling the donation card. And also we created a national registry for the end-stage patient disease and for the donors, for the recipients. And again, with the help of our friends from Saudi Arabia, from Scott, we edited a procedure manual where all procedures for organ donation transplantation can be done through the guidelines. And also we set up a criteria for establishment of organ transplantation centers, for example, the equipment, the manpower, the number of surgeries or transplantation to be performed. There were a good regional and international cooperations, especially from the Başkent University, Turkey. And also we did research. What are the main activities of the center this time? As you see here, we started from Başkent University, where we did two new national program transplantations, then with Scott, Saudi Arabia. Then we have a signed agreement with Niguarda Hospital in Italy, and transplant center in Moscow. And we have a good relation with DTI Foundation in Barcelona, and they came in 2016, they did a workshop on organ and deceased donor donation and brain death donation. And last November I had a chance to attend for 1 week workshop also in Barcelona. Our staff did visit the hospitals and explain to them ICU people, the dialysis center, dialysis, how to diagnose brain death, how to elect the potential donors. So we visited about 59 hospitals from 104 hospitals in Jordan, and we gave instruction how to deal with the potential donors. Other thing, we trained how to so-called administrative and medical coordinators. Also again with the coordination and collaboration with the SCOT and with the Jordanian Society for Encouraging Organ Donation. And if you see here, again, I involved all people, military people, civilian people, policy makers, strategy planning, all people, religious people, different in this issue. Again, we conducted congresses, and you see this is going to help us to understand and to make more awareness among the health professionals. The last thing we did just 2 weeks ago, we have been invited by the Health and Housing and Environment Committee in the upper house, which is the Senate, to talk with them about the legislative and government support to our work. So we asked for them to have a separate fund, financial fund, and we asked them to make more regulations easy, even in order to fix the donating card in the license or in the personal card. After that, we have to make a good arrangement with the neighboring countries to make organ sharing program with these countries to overcome the difficulties, especially in the customs side. Actually, we also visited the schools, the colleges, universities, supermarkets, malls, all these places, and meet with more than 3,500 people in these places who filled the donation card at the same time, and we explained them, and this is the part of the awareness and education campaign on the subject of organ donation and transplantation. We did also, which is the first time in our country, that we follow up the donors, the living donors. We follow them by phone. We conduct meetings with them. We ask them how they are now feeling, how their disease. So the post-donation positive experience of donors can play a role in educating and advocating for donating by living donor. If you have a good approach with the living donors, you can make them to help you. Media involvement, we made a very good deal with the media, and we have nearly every day a program with the media about encouraging organ donation. And also we created, as you all know now, the social media, the Facebook page and the website. What successes and achievement we did through this time? Actually, the main thing is increased cases of brain death diagnosis. Before that, there was no documented brain death cases. Now every brain death case should be documented and reported to the center, irrespective they want to donate or not, irrespective the family want to donate or not. But we have to need first to establish the brain death diagnosis, because the family see that this is a part of the management. It is not for the donation. I asked my colleague, this is a part of management. You have to announce the brain death officially by the committee, neurosurgeon, neurologist, and anesthesiologist, and forensic medicine. So you see, increased number of brain death diagnosis, and we established with the patient, with the hospitals through the internet and the website to inform us about every new brain death case in order to approach the family. The other thing, we did very good job with the religious people, the mufti, so we expand the genetic degree in living organ donation from 1 and 2nd degree to the 5th degree, even to the 6th degree, when they're not available in the 1st or 2nd degree, and this was increased the donation up to 10%. Unfortunately, still until now, there's only 1 or 2% of organ donation covered by deceased donation. In the last few 3 years, we have 71 cases of brain death protocol adopted to diagnose brain death. The confirmed cases were 61, family approach in 35, and family approved to donate in 20 cases. Unfortunately, the approval of the family becomes always late because, you know, we have a big numbers of families. So the sisters are abroad, the brother is not here, the mother is sick, so we have to collect all the family to take the approval, and by this time the organ becomes invalid, not valid for the donation, but we get from this a good number of corneas. So we could utilize only 2 cases from these cases. Also, we in Jordan we fight against the organ trafficking, tight control. There is no single transplantation in Jordan, especially in a private hospital, can be done without our written permission. Every hospital has, to transplant, it should send the paper, the documents to our center. We clarify them with the police, with the other people, and we check every case. Actually, we create a national waiting list, but this is the list who are registered in our center. It's about 461 cases. Not all cases in Jordan who needs transplant. This is the people who are registered in the center. There are many people who are not yet registered. And we did the first medical evacuation of human organs from a brain death donor from one hospital to another hospital. Before that, all the patient, brain death patients, they are the patient transferred to the donating system, to the transplant center. But in this case, we took the organ one hospital and transferred to another hospital. This is the summary of organ transplant in Jordan activity. Most is kidney, about 200 per year, and the liver about 10 to 15%, 10 to 20 cases per year. The breaking news, the last. And now we have the holding donation cards registered in our center is 960. These not the people who are in the Guinness record. These in our center, so we can call them, we can phone them, we can text them, we know them. I know that these are a very big potential donor in the future. The other thing, we cover the financial coverage. Any donor became a legal donor. It means brain death diagnosis, the organs are valid, the family is approved, this cost will be covered by the government. All transplant costs are covered by government. The last thing is that the breaking the inactivity or did block Wednesday 11/9/2018. An exceptional day in transplantation activity in Jordan where heart transplantation resumed after 20 years of cessation since 1997. So our staff successfully coordinated the diagnosis of brain death and procurement, allocation, and distribution of the organs, heart, liver, 2 kidneys, to the 4 different centers according to the general procedures manual guidelines. This is the first case that this time we can, from one hospital, we allocate the organs to other 4 centers by our coordination. And this is a very successful process. And all organs are transplanted successfully with a 6-month follow-up now. And this is the patient with heart transplant, 1 month after his heart transplant. And this is, I did a press conference to announce that. And I think that with coordination, successful coordination and follow-up, we could overcome many difficulties. And what we talk about from the morgue, that the trust, the society, when they have the trust to your organization, this is the success. You know, in this case, the family refused to donate corneas, but they donate heart, they donate liver, they donate kidneys. Why they refuse to donate corneas? But they hear that these corneas will not go by national list. So we are going very transparent by national list, by poor people who receive the organs. By the way, the donor is a very rich family, and the father, he is a physician of this girl who donated her organs. So in conclusions, my friends, functional and supported existence of organ donation and allocation agencies play a major role in the improvement of transplantation activities from living as well as deceased donors through the donor selection and follow-up. Also improvement of brain death diagnosis, family approach, donor management, organs procurement, allocation, and distribution. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Abdul Hadi. Do we have any question from the floor, please? Any questions? Thank you, Abdul Hadi. I will move the chair, Nasir.
Okay, thank you very much. We are coming to the end of session. Next talk is comparative study of the impact of implementation of a quality management system on organ donation in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and will be presented by Professor Stefan Arredondo.
Good afternoon to
while we're waiting for the presentation, I have an announcement, and I guess most of you are very interested in this announcement. It's about a dinner. So the buses will depart from outside the lobby at 7:15 p.m. 7:15 p.m. And the dinner will be at 8 p.m. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everybody. First of all, thank you very much for the committee to give me the opportunity to explain the comparative study that we had done in Arabia, comparing the impact or the implication of one quality indicator program. This project has been developed together with the Saudi Center of Organ Transplantation, the hospital, National Guard Hospital from Riyadh, the Hospital King Saud from Riyadh also, and the Hospital King Abdulaziz from Jeddah, and the Dammam Medical Complex. So in this figure, you can see the evolution of the organ donation rates in Saudi Arabia. In 2017, the PMP rate from Saudi Arabia was 3.6, and the number of transplants was around 10.45 PMPs. And the Saudi Center for Organ Transplantation at the Ministry of Health was trying to implement a program to increase the organ donation. So in this framework, DTI Foundation was approached to implement the project. So we create the project for the implementation of key performance indicators in the Saudi Arabia, taking in consideration the best practices of Spain, USA, and Europe, and also considering the results of one European program called ODECUS, where some quality indicators in organ donation and transplantation were developed. So the basis of the project was to increase the organ donation rate in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but also the secondary objectives of the project was to enhance the commitment of the competent authorities to diagnose what is happening in the country. So different hospitals from different levels were studied. Then we selected some centers to participate in the program. We selected 6 centers from different regions from the country, and we implement a pilot program to put in consideration the quality indicators. So we start to monthly register all the possible donors and also all the possible brain deaths. Also, we train the physicians that were involved in the organ donation. We develop internal and external audits. Then we select which indicators we are going to implement in the country. As a consequence of this study, we create a software to manage all the information and all the results. And of course, we train all the nurses and physicians involved in the country. So here you have an example of the tools that we create. So we create a surveys to diagnose the hospital activity. We create a registry where the doctors are including all the information on all the possible donors per month. And the idea was to try to early detect the possible donors and to inform to all the ICU staff that that hospital is going to have a potential donor. As a consequence, we were measuring and we were evaluating the performance of the hospital. So here you have a picture of the software that we created to follow up this activity and to measure the indicators. And the follow-up of the project was developing using video conference. So in the left you can see how the methodology that we use it. We use it to meet once every month with all the hospital participants to discuss about the cases they have or what is the need of they have, how we can help them. Also, we developed some audits, so we visit the countries, we talk with the medical directors, we talk with the main key donation people from the hospitals, and then we do also external audits. All this activity was developed with the support of the donor medical coordinator of the hospitals, also with the support of the quality department of the hospitals, and also with the involvement of international experts. Related to the training, we also trained to the key leaders of the hospitals in Spain, so they were doing 1 week in different hospitals from Spain, trying to analyze and to understand the best practices. So here you have some pictures of the meetings that the physicians did. But also, we did some workshops in situ. So we trained 14 people in Jeddah, 12 in Dammam, 36 in Riyadh. So we tried to solve the questions and to push them to enhance the organ donation program. So this is just the summary of the project. So as I mentioned, we started in December 2017. So as you can see, the number of the potential donors are increasing with the continuous of the time. We developed a first expert visit in March, and after where we implement the methodology of the project. As a consequence of the implementation of the project, the number of potential donors start to grow, and then this number has been consolidated in the next visits. In addition to, we identify some challenges. We did some recommendations for the kingdom. We did some recommendations at the ICU level, also we did some recommendations in the family approach, and also we established a new plan for the next years about how to improve and how to increase the donor rate. So basically, this is the main goal of my study. My study is trying to compare what was happening in 2017 when we started to work, comparing with the result of 1 year of cooperation. So this study is comparing the implementation of the quality program. So in this study are participating 4 hospitals in the pilot program that we linked 6 hospitals, but finally, because different issues, only 4 hospitals work actively in the project. It was very important the formal nomination of the medical directions of the hospital to the key leaders of the hospital, because this initiative makes us possible to collect data and to support to the donation program. Also, we involve the quality department in all the cases in order to monitorize the activities. As I mentioned, all the donor medical coordinators were trained and doing the visits with it, and also the 4 hospitals that I mentioned are implementing the tools that I described previously. So this is the results. So here you have the analysis of the 6 hospitals that they were in the network. The hospitals that are in yellow, as I mentioned, are the hospitals that finally went out from the program. But you can see, after 1 year of implementation, how the number of possible donors has been increasing from 100 in 2017 to almost 300 in 2018. It represents around 200% of increasement of the possible donors of the network. Related to the actual donors, the last line, In the 4 hospitals of the network, in 2017, we got 18 donors, and after 1 year of implementation, the number of donors has been increased until 26. It represents the 44% of the increasement in the 4 hospitals that we have been implementing the quality program. But what does it mean? It means that you have in this table, in the left table, you have the number of possible donors that the network of the 4 hospitals are providing, comparing with the total number of possible donors of Saudi Arabia. So the number of donors of the network that we were working represent the 45% of the potential donors of the kingdom. If you go to the actual donors, the number of donors that is providing the network that is implementing the quality indicators program represents the 26% of the donors of the kingdom.
1 minute.
Basically, these are the conclusions of the first year implementation. So as I mentioned, the number of potential donors has been increased in 200%. The actual donors has been increasing at 44%. It represents almost the 60% of the potential donors of the kingdom. The most important values of this program is that we created a methodology that the physicians are following to detect and to report donors, and also we create a tool to evaluate the organ procurement performance in the hospital. We identify some plan and some areas for improvement for the future. We have trained professionals, and we consider that a way to continue working is training professionals to make the follow-up and to increase this initiative. So finally, this is a picture that we took in the last visit. This is all the team that is working in the SCOT, and thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you very much. One burning question. Thank you.
So the last talk for this session, we welcome Erwan Aganung Nugaro, sorry the pronouncement here, presenting renal transplantation, Indonesian perspectives.
Yeah, this one. Okay. Good evening. Thank you for the chairman, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today I would like to presentation about the renal transplantation in Indonesia. This is a picture of the Indonesia, the capital in the Jakarta. With a population about 263 million people. This is a slide about the organ transplantation milestone in Indonesia. The beginning of the transplantation in Indonesia performed in Jakarta, supervised by Professor Ota from Japan. And then in 1981, as Pakistan growth, the first law regarding surgery in disease, bodies and transplantation of human tissue was created. And then in the era of 1984 is the first downfall, because there is global economic crisis in Indonesia. But the first transplant in my city in Semarang in 1985, and then stable period, economy condition is stable, and establishment of Kemayoran Agreement, removing religious and cultural barriers for organ transplantation. In 1996 is peak of the global economic crisis in Indonesia, so the government focusing on the primary health care. And there is disaster in my country, Aceh tsunami. And then 2006 until 2010 is rebirth. global concern on organ donor commercialization, rise of organ trafficking. And then 2011, explosive growth about the technical laparoscopic living donor nephrectomy successfully first time in Jakarta, and first pediatric kidney transplantation in Jakarta also. Okay, this is a picture of the Indonesian National Transplant Committee, the Society of the Transplantation in Indonesia. This is my multi-center study about the kidney transplantation in Indonesia, published in the Asian Journal of the Urology, 2011. Yes, for introduction, increase of the ESRD in Indonesia, so substantial increase of the kidney transplantation. Indonesia face fundamental problems that delay the growth of the kidney transplantation. Government policy, funding, human resources, cultural and religious view that result to unstable growth of kidney transplantation. Many barriers in kidney transplantation. Indonesia currently in the rebirth of kidney transplant era. This is most of the transplant performed in the Java Island because the most population live in the Java Island. This is urologists one urologist in Indonesia cover about 600,000 Indonesian, comparison with the USA and UK, I think in little amount of urologists in Indonesia. This is a multi-center study across Indonesia. They perform the kidney transplantation. Total of the kidney transplantation is 635. All of the kidney transplantation is living donor. Yes, this is the demographic base of the age of donor and recipient. Average donor age is 41 years old and average recipient age is 36.3 years old. This is a female donor dominant in female and the recipient dominant in male, and the relationship is related. This is the etiology of chronic kidney disease. Mostly is hypertension and then diabetes mellitus, autoimmune and nephrotic syndrome. Hurdle in kidney transplantation in Indonesia, unequal distribution of human resources and transplant facility. So the most transplant are performed in large city in Indonesia. No standardized and database and reporting system. So unreported kidney transplant incomplete and no follow-up. Government policies and the general public attention are still concentrated towards preventive and infectious disease. Technical capacity. First time the kidney transplantation, we performed the open donor nephrectomy, but start in the 2011, we performed the laparoscopic living donor nephrectomy. Okay, the first pediatric kidney transplantation performed in 2013. A total of 11 cases of pediatric kidney transplant until 2018. Challenges: cultural and societal apathy towards disease organ donation, commercial transplantation prohibited, aware of ablation underwent transplantation abroad, uneven distribution of human resources and transplant facilities, absence of national database system, and absence of organ procurement system and facilities. For the summary, organ transplantation is originally promotion in Indonesia, supported by three main pillars: government and legislative, establishment of National Transplant Committee, legalization of living, related, unrelated, and cadaveric organ transplant, medical cost coverage by insurance scheme. about the religion, participants of religious held in the national meeting and effort to advocate country donor, professional, increasing exposure and formal training for transplant team, participation in international meetings. The necessary legislative rules are established. The national health insurance covers the cost of all transplantation in selected government hospital. The nation is aware of what is needed and are currently working our way to achieve the goal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. Yeah. We are on time, and thank you very much, and thank you for the chair. And this to conclude the session. And don't forget the buses for the dinner tonight. Thank you very much.
Çok yakışık.